Hi there, my name's Nikolas Badminton. I'm a futurist. I help my clients look out 5, 10, 20 years into the future. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you this afternoon to talk about what can be the future of payments. Now, I help my clients think bigger about the world and look at the world through a different perspective. The perspective that I push is the perspective of what if. We shift our mindsets to push away from just looking at the chores and tasks that we have to do today, tomorrow, next week, or even in the next 6 to 18 months to the future, and actually start thinking about using creativity and foresight and the signals of change that I'm going to present today to really help you shape an idea of what that future could be, so you can bring back evidence to today, so you can create more resilient and stronger strategic planning, and you can anticipate risk more readily. Now, when I think of payments, I like to think about the ecosystems that act as the foundation for that. And I like to think about going back 6,000, 8,000 years to the beginning of settlements, to the beginning of agrarian culture and the growth of food on a mass scale for people that caused the first sort of exponential growth of society. Now, back in those days, things like goats and cattle, things like grain and other foods acted as some kind of collateral on which the farmer could borrow against. So early forms of credit were there. But let's leap ahead to 1887. Edward Bellamy wrote a book called Looking Backward. And in that book, he talked about credit cards. A credit card issued with him, with which he procures at the public storehouses, found in every community, whatever he desires, whenever he desires it. Now, in his book, it was mentioned a handful of times the protagonist was using the particular credit card there. It was more like a debit card based on availability of funds. And what's really interesting is this early idea of credit in modern society was really sprung up from some of these visionaries. I look to science fiction and these fiction writers, I even write science fiction myself, to try and imagine what that future could be. And then jump ahead to 1928, and from 1928 into the early 1950s, you had things like this, the charger plate, which was actually an early version of a credit card, and then jump into the 1950s. This card's from 1959, it's an American Express card. I think in 1960, they came out with a plastic card. It's iconic, and the world changed at that point in time. But I think that there was a really poignant moment at the end of the 1960s that started to reshape absolutely everything. In 1968, Douglas Engelbart, this gentleman, gave a demonstration of the world's first personal computing. And he looked at hyperlinks, he looked at desktop publishing, he looked at video conferencing, everything that we use today that fundamentally laid the groundwork of what the future could be. Now, a lot of the computer executives at the time were providing computers the size of large rooms, and they thought no one would ever have a personal computer. And now we're in a future that's connected around the world. Internet connectivity since the early 1990s has been a fundamental foundation of our world in the fourth industrial revolution, where everything is internetized and everything is working. So this is the backbone that's really thrust us forward in another exponential growth spurt from the early 90s to today. But I think that today, with the internet, the access to computing power, and how our world is operating, we're starting to see a democracy coming to banking, access to credit, and a number of other financial systems. I think one of the most fundamental shifts in technological savviness and awareness and capability in the world has been the access of mobile technologies. And we've got about 3.5 billion smartphones in the world. In Canada and North America, there's way more than 60% of the population that have got access to this kind of technology. If you've got access to this, you've got access to be able to start your own business, to access credit, to undertake banking and payments in ways that are fast, seamless, and very convenient. But about 15, 16 years ago in Africa, I started to see a mobile revolution. This is M-Pesa, just using feature phones, not even smartphones. They'd started to introduce mobile banking to people that didn't even have banking systems in place. And that was a really interesting shift to me. And it started to show me that whilst a lot of the world is unbanked, that mobile telecommunications technologies and the internet was going to change absolutely everything. And what's interesting, though, those telecom networks are really starting to step up and try and become banks themselves. Orange is a global network of around about 265 million customers, and 202 million of those are mobile customers as well. And they're providing bank accounts that are contactless. They've got 24/7 advisory services, SMS transfers, and a whole new way of banking as well, trying to steer people away from banks and trying to steer people into their own ecosystems. And I think that one of the big leaps forward has been the access and the democratization to the services within banking and credit ecosystems. And that's the open banking and open APIs. It's just exploded over the years. It's easier, it's a clear view of data across platforms, quick and easy, lots of opportunity for fintechs to come in and disrupt. A few years ago, a great friend of mine came to Vancouver, where I used to live. I'm now in Toronto. And he said, I just signed up for this company called Monzo. Actually, it was called Mondo at the time, rebranded to Monzo. And it's a bank that's literally an app. And this has become one of the most powerful banks in the UK. It's the fourth largest high street bank that exists over there, and it doesn't even have any branches on the high street. And then we've got that big democratization, open APIs, Revolut, N26, Starling Bank, and all these other providers that are starting to open things up. Access to credit comes next. And I think that this is a world that's certainly going to be within the focus of what you and the product teams are going to be looking at. Now, this world of mobile is never going to change. Just this year alone, 1.6 trillion minutes have been spent, 1.6 trillion hours have been spent online since the beginning of the pandemic. And in the future, 2025, we're thinking about 4,900 digital data engagements per person per day is going to happen by then. That's approximately one digital engagement per 18 seconds. We think we're picking up our phones a lot right now, but we're going to be picking them up a lot more. There's going to be systems in the background that we automate, and it's going to be operating on our own behalf. Now, this leads me into really talk about something that I think is really important to watch, and that's the idea of customer totality. Now, it's the idea that you can own the customer end to end, and the company that I'm going to talk about is Amazon. Now, you may have seen these buttons that came out a few years ago as a dash button. These would attach to your sideboards or somewhere in your cupboards in your kitchen, and it's like, I need new diapers, hit the Huggies button, and suddenly they get delivered to you. And they produced a whole raft of these buttons. Eventually it became a wand, and eventually that just morphed into Alexa. So it's really interesting to see that on-demand, easily accessible sort of product without any active intervention through, say, an e-commerce interface. But I think where Amazon is really going to start making some big waves is in retail and in grocery stores. Now, why did they buy Whole Foods? They bought Whole Foods to try and get access to some of the wealthiest people in North America and across the world. And I think that Amazon Go is going to revolutionize what it means for convenience.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So, how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
incredible technology enabled by sensors, artificial intelligence, machine learning behind the scenes there, really recognizing what you're doing, creating that ecosystem between offline and online purchases. And that's going to be a real secret going forward. Now, if we dive into looking at the patent, we understand that there's inventory management systems, cameras and sensors, Wi-Fi's, the app, but really a key part of the product is you and I. It's the people that use it. We're going to be in there. We literally bleed data. We talk about big data today, but by the mid-2020s, the amount of data that we're going to produce is about 174 terabytes of data 174 petabytes of data per year. But what's really interesting is what Amazon is doing around anticipation and using machine learning for that. They've gone into some agreements with Barclaycard in the UK to be able to do some predictive credit. But what they're also trying to do is bring all the data together at the back end so they can predict what you need when you need it, and then it automatically turns up. It's fascinating to me when I look at these big tech companies that really want to shake these things up. And another company I look to is Facebook, and what it's trying to do with its Libra initiative is creating a network of service providers and vendors, and they're trying to securitize ostensibly a stable coin, which is a kind of cryptocurrency, so that it's accessible and usable by people around the world. Again, democracy and access to this. And they're trying to remove central banks from the system as well. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you need to be watching these players, and a lot of players across Asia as well. These are the people that are going to try to establish their own currencies. They're going to try and challenge things like the US dollar, Canadian dollar, British pound, the euro, and to provide their own Google dollars or Amazon dollars or whatever they're going to call them. And they're going to enact something that's known as Greshams Law in economist terms. And Greshams Law is the idea that a bad currency, which is a created currency by a tech company, is going to push out a good currency, which is the fiat currencies that we use today. So watch that very carefully. And there's already been pushback on Libra within the US Senate already. Okay, let's go into the future a little further and go a little deeper. Now, I think that we're headed into a world of full immersion. We're going to transcend beyond these rectangles in our pockets, and we're going to go into a world of augmented reality. Take a look at this short movie by a guy called Keiichi Matsuda called Hyper Reality. He imagines a world in Medellin in Colombia where we're surrounded by data and interaction and gamification.
Estoy libre de mi ira, estoy libre de mi tristeza, el amor es mi experiencia.
Habla español. Adiós. Hola, yo soy María.
Bueno. Hola otra vez. Ay no, cállate.
Okay, that world of immersion is going to have an accelerated cycle of data. We're going to produce more data than ever. We're going to be consuming more data than ever. And we're going to be wearing these devices on our heads. All of the big tech players, everyone from Facebook to Google to Microsoft with its HoloLens 2 are looking at this technology. It's going to reduce down the form factor, and we're going to be wearing glasses, and we're not going to be looking at the mobile phones in our pockets. This is a future that's going to be coming. But really, the game that we're playing is an ownership of us as humans and what we want to be in this world. So we have to respect that, and we have to understand the boundaries of what we can take and what we can give back and create a really sensible ecosystem. We can look to places like China that started to revolutionize the access to biometrics to be able to pay for services and access buildings. So certain city administrations allow you to access their buildings for appointments using facial recognition. They allow you to pay in the same way. And there's a whole bunch of other biometrics from heartbeat and your signature from that to fingerprints to iris checking and whatever that's really starting to come into the fore as ways of really certifying you are who you are. And so you don't have to reach in your pocket and grab out your credit card to make payments and the such like. Now, I like to talk about this chap at this point in time. This is Jaron Lanier. He's a techno sage and he's a prophet in the tech world. I've been following him for some 25 years. He's one of the originators of virtual reality, and he's actually working with a team now that's working within the office of the CTO in Microsoft on something called data dignity. The idea of data dignity is that it disrupts the old world model of what the internet and us is, which is there's a social impact and there's a capitalist society, and at the intersection was advertising, the way of monetizing who we are. But Jaron Lanier says, we're going to operate in this new world where we're going to be immersed and we're going to be sharing the data just by our very being, and we deserve to own that. You should have the moral right to every bit of data that exists because you exist now and forever. So the idea of data dignity is whatever actions you undertake, whether you're making purchases or whether you're just walking around a store or a shopping mall or just within your home and you're undertaking certain tasks like cooking dinner, that could be valuable, but you have the right to own that. You have the right to make money from that. So that's going to be really interesting to follow. It's called Data Dignity and Jaron Lanier. In China right now, they're sort of using a kind of a similar system, but to sort of control the people somewhat. The social credit system gives you a three-figure number that determines how good you are in society. So these kinds of systems are also being used for some sort of nefarious, controllable mechanisms within government. I don't see this happening in the Western world, but it's definitely worth paying attention to how that's going to work and how other systems around the world are going to copy it, but in a democratic sense. Okay, now being a futurist, I practice strategic foresight. I like to look out to future horizons to understand where we might go from today. And strategic foresight is a practice that's coming into every modern business. If you're a product designer, if you're someone that's coding, if you're someone that's creating visions for companies, then you have to consider this. I've got a particular method of following strategic foresight, and I establish principles. So I always put humanity before technology. I talk about plurality, multiple states of futures, inclusion and equity, what we can do to make our consumers own that part of the future, scientific fact and the creativity that comes with that to apply it in new ways. And then I say to clients, look out into the world and try and find the signals of change. This presentation had a number of them, and talking about the future of payments and the ecosystems that are going to be trying to hack into culture and change how we operate. Then I like to build hypothetical scenarios. What if in the year 2050 we suddenly see an ecosystem of us operating in the world, spending money, creating credit systems that have got internal loops where we can bring back some value to the community as a whole. So what if scenarios, speculative fiction, writing long form stories, and then really understanding initiatives into the future of 5, 10, 20 years across dimensions like organizational, regulatory, environmental, financial, technological, and social as well. That framework gives me the opportunity to say, what if the world was going to be different? What if you take up the reins and start to be creative about thinking about the future of the company that you work in and the products that you can offer and what consumers will be like and how the world will operate? I think that we're living in an incredibly exciting world, but we're living in a world where there's literally a battle on the streets right now. This is from a local high street here in Toronto called Roncesvalles, and some of you may live there. Now, there's a campaign there saying that Amazon will never be for lease. There will never be for lease. Amazon will never take over from the local stores. So what's interesting is a company like American Express provides flexibility and partnerships, networks and community that goes above and beyond what the big tech players are planning for the world. And I think we have to keep true to that. And I'm pretty sure that you will. And I think that the new world is going to be very exciting. As we step forward into new cultural ecosystems, we wonder, what if the world of payments changes and how that will have an effect in a greater sense within American Express and beyond. Thank you very much. I'd like to take some questions now.